Good afternoon, and welcome to another episode of Dojo Live. My name is Kim Lantis, and I'm broadcasting live from Hermosillo, Sonora, Mexico. Joining me today, as ever, is my co-host, Carlos Ponce out of Cuernavaca. Hey, Carlos.
Pleasure to be here, Kim.
And we have
ever.
our guests today. Thank you, Carlos. From Echo.ai, Cristina Imre, who is CEO, and Adam Hocek, who is CTO. Thank you so much for being here today, guys.
Thank you.
Happy to be here, Kim and Carlos.
All right. Thank
Absolutely.
you. It's our pleasure. So today, on this Thursday, the 24th of June, 2021, I cannot believe we're over halfway. We're going to be talking about why are the current employee assessment tools inaccurate? And so to get us kicked off, before we get into that very exciting topic, Cristina, why don't you please share with us a bit about your personal background, what led up to Echo, and then Adam, you can go after her.
Well, where to start? I checked your last broadcast with Jen from Red Rex, and I was impressed with her entrepreneurship style and start at 5. And I said to myself, oh, my first memories are not at 5, but I recall at 7.
Mine either.
Really? Okay, so in my case, my first memories were at 7 when I was selling in the flea market shoes and clothes. And what I recall is that I was very inclined to talk with people, interact with them, and ask them a bunch of questions. And this was the way I pursued them also to buy pretty much everything because my exuberance and questions. You can imagine that when it was a problem for my mother, I recall that time to just go on the streets because I would run away and stop strangers just to ask them questions like, where are you going? What is your name? Are you going home? Are you tired? Tell me about yourself. So this was an important thing I wanted to mention here because it started the story of my life. And this is an important linkage to what I'm doing also now. And the fascination I had for human behavior, what makes us tick, our motivation, drive, what turns us off. And this also, I think it started that I had some traumas as a child. And so I needed to get very wired and tuned to every kind of signs. And at some point, I noticed that I start to kind of read people better than others around me, And so this was very interesting. And the life journey started from there. And the entire road was like something to discover people and starting from instability, irrationality, our behavior, because one thing was for me very sure, that we can do a lot better than we do. And that we are too unstable, too superficial. Sometimes we don't use our abilities at the max. And so this was then started from medical school. I went through medical school. Then I immersed myself in psychiatry, psychology, cognitive sciences, NLP, neuroscience. And this was backed up with my entrepreneurial self. So you can imagine it was like a business drive, but all the time human-centric. So then I developed my own companies, as also others, as a fractional executive, working with leadership teams, training them, coaching them, then the entire employee pool, and then going in other kind of culture build, turnovers, and all kind of issues. Basically, I think that what I wanted was to bring out the best of people during their active lifetime, because we are a job a third of our lifetime. And we sleep another third, so we cannot count that. Most of our active lifetime is around work. And so we shouldn't take this for granted, not even for a year or 2 months or whatever. And we need to make sure that we fulfill our dreams as people and companies, because basically the quality of life and of a business is based on the fulfillment of people. And
it's my guess that that's exactly what Echo is all about.
Exactly, because it's one of our line, to create a collective organizational well-being. Otherwise, you cannot change not just the company, but your surrounding, your city, your country, and worldwide. And we can see this now today, that we have a big ratio of unhappiness. And basically, we entered in this market where we want to solve this a little bit.
I'm so excited to be speaking more about Aecho and the impact that you're having not only with your people, but the entire world. Before we get there, let's real quick introduce Adam Hocek. You are the CTO. Let's talk about your journey up till now.
Okay. So I guess in my blood was to be an entrepreneur at a young age. My father was a good caricaturist, and I used to watch, at that time, I'm dating myself, but Batman and on the TV show, and he would draw these pictures of him, and I would ask him, could you draw another one? And he loved it. And I would go and sell them at school to kids and make copies of them, and I would blow them up and replicate them. And so I started, but I always had that drive in me to say, start business, do something different. I moved around a lot as a young kid in Europe, and then came back to, I was born in the States, lived here for part of my life, and then in Europe, and eventually came back. I did my undergraduate in the UK. What I was always struck, I think, to describe myself, I was a mixed bag in that I love technology, and I also wanted to do something good. And it was that mix. So I worked for a lot of different companies. My experience, a lot of Fortune 500s. I worked in mainframe design at IBM. I worked in financials in Wall Street. And I worked for startup companies doing probably one of the earliest voice recognition speech products, toys at the time. I also did a lot with communication, but probably one of the strongest areas that I had experience was in the speech technology, recognizing speech, natural language, fascinated me, and communication. Those were the two areas that I seem to always be drawn to.
Perfect. So how did the two of you come together? It's my understanding that you're both co-founders of Aecho. So when and where did you meet, and tell us more about Aecho itself?
Sure. I'll go ahead, Cristina.
Sure.
Maybe? Okay. So we met. There was another startup prior to this that we both met at, a company called Signal Action AI, and Signal Action was focusing very much so on mental health, and there were two of us who were initial co-founders, and Cristina came in a little later. So we had a longer journey than what we crossed our paths with, but something clicked between us in this. The company, unfortunately, had problems with funding and other issues, but still we clicked, and we found that we complemented each other very well. Cristina has, from her vast experience of coaching, working with executives and others in corporations, understood people very well. And I, being a technologist, but who had a sort of desire to apply it to human needs, found that we complemented each other well, and that we worked very well together. And so we decided at the end of Signal Action that we would look at taking some of that work, some of the thinking in mental health, and start applying it to HR technology to help people, empower them in their jobs, understand people better in their workplace.
It was pretty much like fate, Kim, because we had that time it was a great reset, but after we knew each other and we just clicked. For some time, I knew that I want to create an amazing tech company where I can include all of my knowledge, But I said, without a good, reliable, and that perfect tech partner, I cannot do it, of course. And that was a long journey. And not even in the other company, it was not clear about what we're taking, what direction. There were other issues as well. But the thing is, we started to know each other. And I said, oh my God, Adam is my perfect partner. We match so good together. He translates me in tech, and I translate him in the company, and I bring the human voice. And we have some amazing discussions. And I said, hey, Adam, let's put our strengths together. I bring my tools, skill set, and you yours. And then this was the start of Aecho.
Very good. So that leads us, I think, into our topic for today. Carlos, can you please take it away?
You are on mute.
I mean, there was no way that I was going to let this opportunity of labeling myself again as being on mute. So, of course, I took it. No, I'm just kidding. Okay, well, absolutely. So the topic, I was thinking about this particular topic, and we got, as you know, Kim, we got very good friends at Ancora who deal with recruiting and people, actually. So I was wondering how they're going to be, what their thoughts on this is going to be. The topic is going to be, why are the current employee assessment tools inaccurate? We're going to be answering the question on how to deal with the $1 trillion turnover and disengagement costs. So, Cristina and Adam, the first question that I have for you today is this: why did you choose this particular topic for today's conversation, or why did you feel it was relevant for today's day and age in any space? So let's start with that. Thank you and welcome to the show.
Well, today we have, I would say, 2 trillion, the current moment, of cost with turnover and engagement alone. Mm-hmm. When you want to solve a problem in a company, you need to understand the real problem, and their assessment tools come into handy and in place, because based on those, companies are spending dollars to do something about it, or they don't do anything because they are not actionable. And this is a real feedback from the market. Leaders don't even know how to approach what they get from the reports. Mm-hmm. And at some point, I think that we just lost the common sense, including in reporting, including in biases, in inaccuracies. And because we are also in the emotional spectrum, you could see now the scandals around facial recognition and how wrong that is right now and how biased it is. And in my view, assessment tools are the same because they were on the wrong foundation. And if you are start to talk with the people who are using them once, and then the people who need to take action on them, these are two separate entities. At some point, I said, oh my God, but I come from those people. And why we don't articulate our problem? We don't understand them. Huge data, reports, a lot of things, and those are not for our mindset, a leader especially, and many managers. The sales people, marketing people, those are not tech people. But the tools are techy. That's
right,
one.
Right.
Two, why the inaccuracy? The inaccuracy is based from the get-go, from the starting point with preparation. If you consider human behavior and human science at the beginning, you know that everything we do needs to consider our emotional state, what is happening in the background, what is happening with your kids at home, Kim, what is happening with your wife, and so on. So if we just take an assessment tool, especially if you just need to rate them without saying anything, just rate some notes, you don't have context, you don't have background. Then if you have some open-ended questions, you can give a little bit more context, let's say, but again, you can edit. And again, you don't have the background, you don't have the context. So from the get-go, you take a lot of data based on pretty much nothing. And even if you drop the dice, you can get the same results. For example, if you increase employee engagement with 10%, you can save $2,400 per year per employee on average. For a company of 100, that's $240K. That's huge. It's 2 top executives or 5 other employees or put in marketing innovation, not to mention companies from 1K above. Now we enter millions. And this is just a 10%. You can gain that through any kind of action you take as a company without any tool. You can have 20%, 30% if you do something for your employees. So from the get-go, we get wrong kind of data. And then we have a report that leaders say they cannot act upon many times, or they don't understand, or they are not exactly so specific, and it's not for their mindset. And so we are full with a lot of AI tools on the market, a lot of assessment tools on the market, which are most of them unimodal, not multimodal, taking in consideration what I said before. And then we take actions and we spend millions. And then we see the results. We see 2 trillion costs and losses for companies today. And just to make my point even stronger, you see the data through the last decade that the unhappiness level goes away. And our common denominator with Adam is suicide. So
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Okay.
suicide rate went very, very high during the last decade. And 2, especially the youth suicide rate, the new workforce. And so now we take this in consideration as well. Well-being and a multimodal approach to bring the right type of data.
Okay.
And exactly what you need.
So we have, I think you laid out the problem quite clearly, right? There's lots of data. It's clear that everyone can agree that there's a problem, right? But the approach to how to solve this problem has been wrong. Like, we're collecting data, we're trying to analyze this data, but from what I understand, you're saying we're actually collecting the wrong data, right? Which therefore puts all of our efforts as a moot point. So what is the right data? What is it that Aecho is collecting, or what is it that you're doing differently?
I can chime in on that one. So part of it is we are increasing the data that we're collecting. And because we're collecting more data, and I'll explain in a minute how we analyze and use that data, we're able to make better, more accurate results. So we're improving on the current employee assessment tools by taking in more data. So for example, one of the things that I just came to me this morning, I was doing something with a mutual fund, and it said, how would you rate, it was a questionnaire survey at the end. It said, how would you rate it? Were you very happy, not happy, somewhat happy? That was the level of it. And I was a little frustrated with specific things, but there was no place to voice that. So what we're trying to do is we're using speech and other modalities, but speech is the key one, as yet another input into the analysis of information. So there's a lot can be said in speech that these questionnaires 1 to 5 just don't cut it. They don't capture a lot of the issues. The other thing that the speech gives us is a subconscious insight into the person. They may say one thing, but their voice, the tonality, has other information in it. Their emotions, we can start looking at their personality and behaviors as well from that. So what we're doing is we're really collecting a lot more information, but much more targeted. And of course, the way we ask the questions, and that is another art to it, because there, as Cristina said earlier, the biases, we're trying to look at it in an unbiased way so that we're much more inclusive, because the way you ask a question can sometimes determine the answer. Right. So we're trying to be sensitive to that. And,
so let me make sure I get this right. You're able to capture employee assessments verbally.
Everything is voice-based. Yes, you will be guided. Everything is voice-based. Nothing is written.
Because a lot of times what happens when we send out these forms, and I think you touched on this earlier, I personally like giving back feedback or whatever, the multiple choice, select, scales, yes, no, or whatever, that's easy. And then when they get to the ones of what was your opinion about this? Or what is one thing that you would change? Or and then to me, it's really hard because I've got like, what's going on in my head? How do I make this succinct? How do I type this? Like, and so if there's the ability to be like, well, I think blah, 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 blah. I think right there, going back to the topic, my engagement, the likelihood that I'm even going to answer this question, if it's not forced upon me, right? Sometimes you have to answer, but is increased. Like, okay, like I'll tell you. And then on top of that, you can go through these different layers of like, it was great versus, yeah, it was great. You can totally tell the difference between, did I mean it? Didn't I mean it?
Exactly, Kim. I mean, your feedback is perfect because you come from the consumer point of view. And yes, so we want to give meaningful insight into people's thoughts, emotions, and behaviors. And we do this through voice because this is the best way today to not cheat. You cannot cheat on this test because you cannot re-edit your voice or your scale or your little kind of imprint, which is unique. Did you know that today you can recreate faces from voice? We are so advanced. So you have that, you have the pitch and other details Adam can tell you from his side. But the matter of fact is that if you are cheating on this test, let's say we get that data. We know that you were not honest. We know that you were too stressed. And we even redirect you to balance your state before we move on. So balance state is our first #1 approach. You cannot start the assessment until you are not emotionally balanced. And that's just huge.
I got a question here, and probably Adam, as the CTO, he can provide a nice view on this. Adam, well, I understand. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I understand you come from a background that is linked or related to speech recognition. So these types of specialties and spaces. So I'm very interested in hearing from you. Because I'm looking at your website, and one of the taglines, it's very interesting and intriguing, where it says a deep and meaningful understanding to discover themes you never knew exist. In that context, I'd like to ask you, from maybe one of your clients or one of your experiences with Aecho, what have you seen that is one or something that someone has told you that they discovered something that they didn't even know that existed? Can you mention an example of things that have been discovered through Aecho by some of the end users?
Sure, I can, and I have to say it's still work in progress. So we're still continuously enhancing the process. So I don't want to give the
pre-launch state.
We're in pre-launch state, but we had seen it
okay.
Yeah, so just to frame it, but we did see that with mental health, for example. You can actually hear in the person's voice a depression, anxiety, or whatever the conditions may be. They exist there. So separate to, and when I earlier said tonality, it's not what they're saying it, but it's the tone of the voice that's carrying that information. And we can see that. We do like spectrograms and other analysis to be able to see this type of subtle embedded information in the speech.
Okay.
Can I give you a couple of examples?
And I'm on the verge of tears. You can immediately know that I'm not in the best mental state.
I could give you examples, Carlos, from the trenches, because here it comes my background.
Yeah, please.
And this is what we include here especially. It can be everything. I mean, culture, it would be one. Most of the companies, they don't know their culture and their employees either. And when you enter in the company and you start to interview and read the people, you discover that there is, or maybe multiple cultures or one, or it's a subgroup inside the company who loves to play soccer, and they meet each Saturday night to do pizza together or something, and you had no idea about such thing, such group as a company. You didn't took that direction. You promoted yourself like a very serious type of company who goes in this direction, has this kind of hobbies, this kind of values and so forth, but your values are different because 60% of your of your employees have different values and you don't know them. We will know that. Or you discover a lot of issues in a small department or problems between people because you have those threads to discover, and then you know where you need to dig. And so, yeah, this would be two, but we can develop if you want later.
Okay. I was thinking also that I was wondering, who are your clients? Who are you? I know you're in pre-launch, but who's your ideal client, or what spaces or verticals do you serve beyond the cases that you have already mentioned?
So we are taking a mixed pool of clients for multiple reasons, but let's say that we want to go also SMBs, and also large companies, but at the beginning and in the first year, we are targeting up to 50K employees. And so we will create a mixed pool just because we want to be the most accurate tool in the market when it comes to truly know what happens in your company and know your employees better than they know themselves. And so we want to see differences between this kind of companies, what we can discover and how we can even then later develop the product in a way that suits them better.
Mm-hmm.
Great.
So I have
Kim, got a question, Kim,
yeah.
right?
Yeah, I have two questions actually.
Go ahead.
One going
Yeah.
back to what you were speaking about earlier, Cristina, about culture. So we've got one element, which is company culture itself. Just what are our values? What are we moving toward? Who are the people that comprise us? And then the other one would be culture, as in where we come from, right? You're in Romania. I'm
Right.
an American living in Mexico. Adam, you're quite multicultural. I think you've grown up and lived in quite a few places. So these outside influences of just, let's say, for example, in a lot of Asian cultures, one would not feel the freedom to speak without first being given that permission, right? Versus me, the American interrupter, who I have no problem talking whenever, probably even when it's inappropriate. So do you take these other cultural factors into consideration as well? Like what type of study has to go or is involved in that to make sure that it's not biased and that it is in fact accurate?
This is one of the beauties of multimodal approach, to take these facts in consideration. By the way, just to tell about our market, we target first remote and semi-remote companies, exactly that we take a company from US with multiple employees from all over the world. And every time we do or put a question in the final form, we go through this process. Is this biased in any way? How can we then train the AI in a sense that it won't be based on gender, culture, or background, as you mentioned, or other ethnic kind of particularities? And so if it's something that it's not clear and it could be biased, we just take that out. That's one. Two, we don't take in consideration only one thing. If we would go through fluency, what you're saying, your kind of English knowledge and your wording and how complex it is, then again, we would bias against this kind of people who are not native in English, including me. So we consider through fluency, let's say, multitude of not just wordings, but also speech and interferences and emotions. And then we also use the transcript to go further digging, because we don't just analyze voice and emotions through voice. We have then the transcript that will go through another kind of filter through secondary emotions level. And then we put together 1 and 1 and 2 and 3, and we see if there are inconsistencies. And then we train it again and again and again.
You can make word maps and find different correlations and things like that.
Specifically.
My final question, because we are coming up to the end of today's show, unfortunately, would be transparency. Like, how do you anticipate the employees receiving such intimate assessments? Or how would you combat any sort of big brother type of mentalities, or even just this fear that my honesty, or even, like you said, knowing me better than I know myself, to prevent any risks of, pushback or negative consequences? How do you approach this with the companies that you're going to be working with and the people that make them up?
We are starting from the contract. In the contract, we will stipulate through the company that you cannot have any kind of negative measures after this assessment. This is the initial basic kind of need. Second, we have different kind of layers for access, and such assessment, many of the assessment, the initial KPI-based engagement assessment, it will be anonymous. So you won't have access to such informations anyway. You will have exactly what you need for that. And so this assessment is for the KPI reason. And then the other ones, for example, Motivation 3.0, the most exciting one, where we need to have it linked to your name. All the questions and the answers are so framed in a way that they cannot just bring you any negative consequences, because they don't bring out the negative things. No, we dig inside, finding your subconscious filters, your intrinsic motivation filters, and other kind of filters that represent your inner kind of personality drive, what I need to know to make things better for you. So this is another one. And we have some more, but this would be the main things.
Yeah. And I think that leads us into when we could have Aecho back on our show to talk about, we've talked about the data, and now we're still missing the second piece, which is the actionable items that come out of this, right? And how you're attacking the opposite end of the same stick here. It's really been our pleasure to have both of you on our show today. Before we wrap up, Adam, Cristina, do you have any final words of wisdom that you'd like to share with our audience?
We are in that boat where we need to do things better for the future generation. We are not in the right direction. People are unhappy, they are killing each other and themselves, and this shows next generations of a lot of pain to have. And us who have kids, we can feel this and we worry about this. And so I would say that let's put this as a priority, not just gain something today. Think about if you want to have a livable earth, not just as climate, which is also important, but also from a human fulfillment point of view. And this is really serious. We cannot take any more day without thinking about this.
And I would just, if I could just add to it, I think
please do.
Okay. I would say to technologists that it's not technology for technology's sake, and I've been there, but it's also for thinking further for what you can do. And it's so important to, even for those who have it, to keep the aim in mind all the time. It's so important, because things could be used for good and bad. But if you have the right aim, that's your target, then you can achieve that aim. So I think we're hoping to do that with Aecho.
Thank you. Great.
Perfect.
Well, we've come to the end of today's show. Thank you so much for being here, Cristina, Adam as well. Carlos, what do we got coming up?
Absolutely, Kim. We got 2 shows coming up next week. One is yet to be confirmed. And this is going to be with, I'll tell you right now. So on Wednesday, next Wednesday, which is June the 30th, we're going to be speaking with Prakash Hosali, one of the principals at Aquila.ai. And then on Thursday, which is July the 1st, we're going to be speaking with Maju Kuruvilla, the principal of Bolt.com. So these are, of course, don't forget, this is if you're watching, don't forget our recap show on Monday, in which we recap this week's shows in 10 minutes or less. So that's going to be right here on Dojo Live. So that's what we have before we take off on a much needed and very, very deserved vacation. Right, Kim? We're looking.
Yes, we're all kind of going
this.
out of the office at the same time.
Yeah. It's like, boom, we're taking off. But that's what we have right here on Dojo Live, folks. So join us next week right here at 12, Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday of next week. See you here then and here. And of course, thank you, Adam, and thank you, Cristina, for having joined us right today on Dojo Live. It was great. So we're going to be in touch. Stay tuned.
See you next week.
Thank you, Carlos.
Thank
Bye,
you,
everyone.
Carlos, Kim. Thank you both.